Hey everybody, this is Jim with Harvest Harmonics, and welcome to the Cinco de Mayo edition of the Future of Farming Today. And today, of course, is the Mexican holiday where in America, everybody uses this as an excuse to go get drunk on tequila and beer. But in Mexico, they're celebrating the independence and a war against the French, I believe, where they actually beat the French. It was a very famous battle where they actually fought off a superpower, I guess, at the time. So happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody, all of our buddies in Mexico, and also happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody else who just wants to celebrate or have an excuse to celebrate. But I have an excuse to celebrate, or we have an excuse to celebrate here at Harvest Harmonics because more and more farmers are finding out about us every day, and more farmers are finding out just how amazing this technology is. In fact, sometimes it's so good, we actually have to tell the farmer, look, you really need to take a look at your fertility program. You really need to look at your pesticide program because if you keep using as much fertilizer as you're using, there's a good chance that you may burn out your crops because our system's going to amplify the way that plants utilize that fertilizer so much more effectively that you actually might start to harm your plants if you use too much fertilizer. So it's very interesting. In fact, I wanted to kind of share with you guys a screen. This is not our product or our device, but it's a very interesting kind of report, and I'm waiting for them to actually improve this, or I should say update this, because it's been since 2014 since they created this report. And it's a very interesting article because it actually showcases, and I'm going to share this with you just so you guys don't keep seeing my face here, but it showcases nitrogen usage around the world. In fact, let me see if I can, there we go. So when you look at this, the cool thing about this chart is it actually shows the efficiency of nitrogen usage around the world. And what does that mean? That means, in fact, let me see if we can pull up North America here. Okay, there we go. I really want to get this. Let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit so you can see it better. There we go. Okay, good. So let's just take a look at North America, right? So North America, we can look at this by a color-coded chart. And as you can see along the bottom here, if you see yellow, that means that only that between 0 and 20% of the amount of nitrogen applied to the soils is being utilized in terms of plant production. So that means that on a converse scale, whatever is not being utilized is being wasted. So let's just take America, right? The United States of America, right? Now, as you can see in this chart here, in the United States, it's hard to see because this thing keeps slipping down, but okay, in the United States here, it basically says, this is back in 2014, but over in the 40 years that they had this, the nitrogen usage was basically about 71.9%. Now that means that of all the nitrogen that was added to soils as fertilizer in the United States, the plants were able to absorb and utilize about 71.9% of that over the average, right? Now, what does that mean? That means that 20%, actually 28%, give or take, is being wasted. So 28% of all the nitrogen used over the period of 1961 to 2014 was not absorbed and utilized by the plants in terms of crop production, but it either leached out of the soil in terms of the groundwater and became part of our waterways. A lot of that evaporates back out into the air as nitric oxide or other types of greenhouse gases and can create environmental hazards, right? Environmental hazards in terms of it can actually destroy wildlife. And here in Florida, they have a problem with that called red tide. Red tide is essentially an algae bloom, which causes algae to really bloom in massive amounts. And what happens when that happens is fish and other wildlife are choked out. They start to become starved for oxygen because of all the excess algae that's blooming. Well, why do the algae bloom? The algae bloom because of the fertilizer, the excess nitrogen that's being dumped into our waterways is unfortunately causing these algae to grow out of control. And that, of course, causes fish and other wildlife to die. So it's a big environmental hazard here in Florida and the Gulf of Mexico when this happens. In fact, it's been happening a lot more regularly over the last 20 years than it used to, right? As farmers use more and more nitrogen, there's a bigger chance that more and more of that nitrogen is not going to end up in the crops, but it's going to end up in the waterways, it's going to end up in the atmosphere. Okay. There's another article, several other articles, one of which I read not too long ago called The Nitrogen Cycle. or excuse me, the nitrogen cascade. And it was a scholarly article about how nitrogen compounds, especially nitric oxides and ammonias, when they evaporate out into the air, because they're not the natural form of nitrogen that's part of the air, they're a form of nitric oxide, they're 200 times more damaging to the environment. That means while we're all talking about pollution and environmental damage and climate change due to, let's say, man-made factors, yes, we can look at cars, but a lot of that comes from agriculture, right? And it's a big problem. You know, we can talk about how big of a problem it is, but it is a big problem, right? But that's just the United States. So again, we're at 72%, give or take, right? What about in Canada? Okay, Canada is not as efficient as the United States, right? They're putting a lot of nitrogen in. Now, here we see the difference. It's actually dropped, right? It used to be more efficient. It used to be actually a carbon mining, which means they had a net positive in terms of carbon, or in terms of nitrogen use efficiency. And then around the 60s, when they started using a lot more nitrogen, that kind of flipped, and now it became, it's now down to 59%. So that's just in North America. Now, what about down in South America, where a lot of the stuff, or in Central America, I should say, where a lot of the stuff is grown? So let's take a look at, for example, Mexico. Mexico's at 45% nitrogen use efficiency, right, over time. And it was 75% back before the Green Revolution came in the 60s, and now it's down to about 45%. What about, what is this? I can't even see this because of the screen. The screen goes. There you go, Guatemala. Okay, Guatemala is at 45%, 44.5%. Honduras, 57%. Nicaragua, down to 34%. Wow, that's pretty bad, okay? El Salvador, 30% efficiency. Costa Rica, where a lot of our coffee is grown, there's a ton of coffee and other stuff grown in Costa Rica. 24% nitrogen use efficiency. That means 75% of the nitrogen they're using is being wasted. It's not being used by crops. It's going down into the soil, it's going into the waterways, it's going up into the air, right? Panama, 21%, okay? So these are all pretty bad numbers, and you have to stop and think about this for a second. Now, in the United States, we produce a lot of food, right? But if you ever go to the grocery store in the United States, what you're going to see is a lot of our food comes from Mexico. A lot of our food comes from Guatemala, Costa Rica, Honduras, Nicaragua. A lot of our melons and other fruits come from these countries, right? And they're being exported into the United States. But the way that these countries are growing our food creates a lot of problems environmentally, and it's, of course, very wasteful. Now, what if we went down to South America? Okay, Argentina we see is 118%, meaning they actually export more of their nitrogen than they're actually using. They may not be using enough nitrogen actually. You know, Chile, 36%. We have a lot of farmers down in Chile. We're trying to help them with that, but 36% here. What is this? Peru, okay, 31% efficiency. Ecuador, 39%. Colombia, 25%, where all that Colombian coffee comes from, right? Brazil's a little bit better. They're at 57%. Bolivia, 70%, and Paraguay, they're one of the best. Now, ultimately, where you really want to be is in this blue zone, because if it's in this brown area where they may not be using enough to get a good quality crop out. And I can go through this, and you can go all the way across the world. You can go to all these different areas. But the bottom line, what I'm trying to communicate to you, is that in a lot of areas, farmers are using a lot more nitrogen and a lot more fertilizers than they really need. And with the crop booster by Kiminasi plants, you can reduce that nitrogen use, reduce that fertilizer use tremendously. Now, if you're watching this and you're a farmer, you should be very excited about this, because the complaint that I've been hearing from farmers over the last year and a half or 2 years is the cost of fertilizer is skyrocketing and I can no longer afford to grow my crops. So if you had a solution like our crop booster that you knew was going to dramatically reduce your need for fertilizer by 20, 30, 40, even 50%, this should be very exciting news for you, because you no longer have to be a slave to the fertilizer companies and feel like, oh my God, if I can't get fertilizer at a decent price, I'm out of business. Now you have a solution that will help you become a lot more efficient in terms of how you're using fertilizer. And that should be very good news. Now, if you're an environmentalist and you're worried about climate change, or you're worried about change in farming practices and the effects of farming on the world, you should be excited about this too. Because again, if we're helping farmers grow better quality crops and more yield, and reducing their nitrogen and carbon footprints, and dramatically reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, that's better for the environment, and that's going to become a major benefit to the environmental movement. So you should be excited too. And if you're a fertilizer or chemical company, I don't know if you're going to be excited by this, but hey, there's opportunities to work with us to help the farmers become more efficient so that you get the most bang for your buck. So if they're going to keep using your products, of course, they can get more yield and better quality out of it too. So this really is a win-win-win situation. Everybody wins in this equation. The only people that don't win are the people who are trying to make money at the expense of the environment and farmers. That's really pretty much it. So if those people are watching this, I don't know what to say other than, hey, we're trying to help as many people as we can. We want to help people eat healthier. We want to help farmers make more money. We want to help the environment be more sustainable and it lasts us a lot longer. So if these are the types of things that you're interested in, then give us a call at 727-324-6750. And let's work together to help you become part of the future of farming today, and also to help the farmers of the world create a better, healthier environment so we can all win. Hope to talk to you guys very soon. Have a happy